crazy family. We didn't, like, going to church wasn't a priority necessarily. God was always still there in my mind. He was, I believed, but I would say probably this was like the part of my faith where I say God was kind of on the back burner. He was there kind of simmering back there, and I would maybe move him to the front burner when I wanted him and was ready for him. And so he kind of worked with me through those years and convicted me of his priority in my life. Kind of learned the difference there. A lot of people call it like wearing the cross, but not bearing it. And so, but I think going through that process and having been there and feeling that too, and like knowing inside that I was missing something, that, I wasn't completely committed and giving my life and giving control, and all the pieces fully over to God, but not really knowing how, and just kind of confused with how to make it all work and how to do that. And then when I got to college, decided I'm, going to church. I'm getting into Bible studies. I went then on my first mission trip to Ensenada, Mexico, where I was able to take part in building a basketball court for an orphanage there, and just loved that way of serving and felt like so full and felt God and Jesus and his love, and loved sharing that with other people too. But then at the same time as that was happening, I was with this friend. I met this friend, and she was with a different church, still Christian, but a different denomination. And she was kind of speaking into me that I wasn't fully following God, that I needed to get baptized in their church, and that my childhood baptism wasn't real, and that I was living a sinful life and wasn't, and I was like, whoa, like all of these words that she was speaking to me, because like her church kind of had this recruiting, process, but it really came across negative and icky to me. And it kind of like made me take a step back and be like, I have some red flags here, but it also sent me in a spin. Like, why are there such differences in the Christian faith alone? And why am I getting this message? But yet I know what I've learned. I know what God is in my heart. And I know that my childhood baptism was real. And how can you be speaking to this to me? And then it went further in my mind, like a spiral, and then I was like, how do I even know then that Christianity is the right religion, just because this is what I grew up with, and I grew up in this part of the world? And, so I think that kind of sent me on an exploration of really truly wanting to understand Christianity more and all the parts of it, the different denominations, and also other religions, that I wasn't as familiar with, the different world religions, and what were the similarities and what were the differences, and what did I truly believe? And so I think like that took a while, like I was in study, and I was, I'm glad. I am so thankful during this time. This could have been a time where I could have given up and just thrown up my hands and been like, this is all a bunch of bunk and too many mixed messages, and tapped out. And I think that's what some people can do, because it is like overwhelming and confusing and contradicting and so many mixed messages, But for me, like during that time, in truly searching and pouring my heart out there and just doing the study, opening the Bible, looking into the different religions, like ultimately Jesus and he's the only one, that's alive and loving and grace-filled and relational. And he just brought me right back to him. And so I would say that that is probably the defining moment when my faith became my own. And then I was fully bought in and invested and ready to wear and bear the cross.
Wow. That's so powerful, because I think a lot of times people, they do tend to just follow what they were brought up in, and they don't really, or what their parents told them to do. They don't really understand what they believe and why they believe it.
Mm-hmm.
But that process and journey and that God kind of took you through, and then where you were challenged by your friend, you know what I mean? And questioning, I think that was necessary. I think God needed you to go and just pick up every book and do your own due diligence, right? And then it all ultimately led you back to Christ in the end. But you needed to do that work to be solidified in your faith and what you believed in. So that's a really powerful story.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely a hard part of my journey, I would say, but you're right. Absolutely necessary for me to kind of break through and be ready for the next step that God had for me.
Yeah. So transitioning a little bit, when you wrote your book, Dormant Faith, when you were writing your book, who specifically were you speaking to, or I guess who is the book specifically for?
Yeah, that's good. It's primarily written for Christians, so believers, and it is for them to encourage them in this walk to essentially, yes, it's hard and there are ups and downs, but to keep going. But I do think it could also be beneficial to those who are curious about what Christians believe and why. And even for those who are not believers and feel like Christians are hypocrites or, don't fully understand either why we do the things we do or why we might do it differently from each other. So to kind of better explain like some of our beliefs and some of our journey, and even that, yeah, we're human too, and we make mistakes, and it walks through some of that too, and why we might misrepresent God in certain, not intentionally, but, in certain ways because we're human and we're not perfect, but also how it's like this beautiful transformational journey that God takes us on. That's a lifelong process to become more and more like Him, and how we do that and how we stay in the game and how we be confident in that process and through that process to share the good news that we have to share.
That's really good. I'll make sure that we include your details about the book so our community can know where to purchase it as well. Kari, I wanted to mention something. There is a mother maybe listening to this podcast episode, and she's like, oh my goodness, she's doing so much. She's an author. She's a mother. She's a wife. She's serving in international missions, helping to build a school. How do you have time to do it all without burning out?
That is such a good question. And it has been a lifelong journey. I think my personality is one to just, try to be a go-getter. So I have definitely had to learn. Probably one of my biggest challenges is learning how to be still. So truly be still and find time to, I feel so much like it is so much about priorities, right? And first and foremost, I have to make sure that I am right with God, that I am taking time for my spiritual practices and disciplines, so that I am in His Word, that I am in communication with Him in prayer, that I am with other believers, getting fed and encouraged by them too, that I'm taking the time to be filled up first and foremost, and have also learned to build in time for personal care. Yeah, I think we can feel so guilty about that, and sometimes, or like, I can't make time for that, but and exercise, honestly, like you mentioned these, my crazy physical endeavors, but honestly, like that is some of my release. Like that's a way for me to just relax in different ways and clear my mind, and in a way for me to get outside a lot and enjoy nature and soak God up that way and be more quiet my mind in those times too. Those are all first and foremost like essential for me to be able to continue to have energy and honestly like be filled with the Spirit, because it is the Holy Spirit who does this work and who gives me the energy and the confidence. Definitely not getting that on my own, so who gives me all of that. And so if I am not, and I talk about this in my book too, like sometimes we know that the Holy Spirit is there and in us, but there's like this block in accessing the Holy Spirit. So how do we access him inside of us? And how are we in tune to him inside of us so that, he can flow out? And so we can have just the passion and the love and the energy that we need to give to our kids and our husbands and our jobs and our everyday and all the things that we are involved in and called to be involved in for his glory and his greater purpose and work.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and for everything that you shared. Where can our community learn more about you, your book, and the missions that you're doing? Maybe help support it.
Yeah, so probably the best, easiest spot where you can find all of that is my website, and that's devotedexplorer.com. And on that, I talk all things faith, fitness, and travel. But you can also find a link to my book on that, and also a link to Go on the Mission to learn more about both of those. My book can also be found on Amazon. You can just search Dormant Faith by Kari Hunnicutt, and then Go on the Mission can also be found on goonthemission.com.
Thank you so much again, Kari, for everything that you shared, and to our lovely community. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. I will see you in the next one. Bye.